Hello, my name is Blossoms and welcome to another Genshin Impact video, and today we're basically just going to go over my first impressions of Eula. I'm not particularly gunning for her on the banner, so we are in the trial dungeon here, and I've been messing around. I've gone through quite a few times, and I've got a pretty decent grasp of how she works and operates, and I'm just going to go ahead and give you guys my first impressions, as well as whether or not you may or may not want to summon on the banner. But first of all, let's go ahead and show off some of her gameplay and just some of the notes that we can talk about there. First thing I wanted to talk about is the fact that her normal attack pattern here is really cool. Very, it's got a lot of finesse to it. And you can see she's hitting some huge numbers on her physical damage here, which is pretty nuts. Even considering the fact that the sword doesn't have that high of a physical damage bonus, it simply just has a really high base attack, and she has level 8 talents, which is helping her out a lot. And you can do two things with the E skill here. You can tap it, and you're going to go ahead and build up a couple stacks there. You see the thing swirling around here. And then you can hold it, and it'll consume those stacks and drop 2 blades there and deal a huge AoE of physical damage there. It also decreases their resistance to cryo and physical, so that's very important as well. You can see that guy's taking a little bit more damage than he was previously because we were able to go ahead and do that to him. And then once you get the Q here, this is where things start getting really out of hand, because everything you do is going to be adding a stack while you have this Q here, and you can get up to 30 stacks. And as you can see there, after a short duration, it's going to explode and deal a ridiculous amount of damage. It just did 30k non-crit to that guy. We'll go ahead and go back in here, and we'll get that ult, see if we can get multiple people with it here, and see if we can decrease some resistance. Try to get this to do as much damage as we can. Honestly, okay, probably the best representation of it right there. We just did a 100k physical crit. Now, do keep in mind we do have a 5-star sword, and this 5-star sword is pretty nuts, especially since it's tailor-made for Eula. However, 100k physical damage is nothing to scoff at. At 80k right there, you can see it's pretty easy to proc off. And you can imagine if you're pairing Eula with some turret characters, that she is just going to deal insane amounts of damage, and nothing is going to be able to stop you. Alright, that was a brief rundown of some of her gameplay, how it works and how it operates, and just the kind of potential that you can actually get out of it. But let's go ahead and run down some of her stuff a little bit more specifically. First of all, we have her normal attacks. As you saw, nothing too crazy there. Very stylish though, very cool to actually look at, and they feel good to play with. The charge attack is something like Deluxe and Betos. I forgot to show that off, so you go ahead and actually move forward and slash instead of spin to win like a lot of other Claymore characters. And the scalings on these is nothing too crazy, nothing too bad either. It's pretty darn solid. Especially at level 8 here, you're going to be getting some good numbers right here, right? Then we got something like Eyesight Vortex, which is her E skill here, and as I mentioned, you can press, and each hit is going to give her a stack of Grimheart, and you can get a max stack up to 2 times, and you can gain some every 0.3 seconds. So essentially, from what I gather this, if you hit 2 opponents, you can get both of those stacks simultaneously with the press. Otherwise, you're going to have to wait for it to cool down, and you're going to have to hit E again to get that extra stack. And then these little stacks actually increase her resistance to interruption and defense, which is pretty nice. Makes her a lot more tanky. But then when you hold it while getting those stacks, you're going to do an AoE cryo damage to everybody, which scales pretty well on its own. But then the stacks are consumed, and they'll have their physical and cryo resistance decrease. Each stack consumed by a stack of Grimheart will be converted into an Ice World brand that deals cryo damage to nearby opponents. So yes, you're not only going to be decreasing their physical and cryo resistance, you're also going to be dealing more damage for having these stacks. So very much so the gameplay loop is getting these stacks, holding the E, dealing a bunch of damage with your E skill, while also accumulating more things with your Elemental Burst to go ahead and just deal huge amounts of physical damage, as well as some really solid cryo damage. And then, as I said, these do scale pretty well. The press damage is fairly normal, and the hold damage is actually really good at around 400%. And then, as you can see, the Ice World brand damage will be 154%, and you get a pretty solid defense bonus while you have those stacks. Then you see things like the duration, and you see the physical resistance and cryo resistance decrease. I do believe this scales with how you level it, because I believe it was supposed to be something like 20% or something like that at base. So I think actually leveling the talent here does increase the amount of resistance shred you get. Somebody correct me in the comments if you have Eula and you're leveling her up. Let me know that. I would love to see that. And, you know, all the different durations here. The press cooldown is very low, which is very important to note. So getting those stacks is not going to be a problem, especially since the duration far exceeds your cooldowns. You just have to, you know, pay attention to it. And then the hold cooldown isn't too shabby either. And then right here, we've got the main attraction, which is Glacial Illumination. Brandishes her greatsword, dealing cryo damage to nearby opponents, and creates a Lightfall sword that follows for a duration up to 7 seconds. While present, the Lightfall sword will increase Eula's resistance to interruption. When Eula's own normal attack, elemental skill, and elemental burst deal damage to opponents, they will charge the Lightfall sword, which can gain an energy stack once every 0.1 seconds. Once the duration ends, the Lightfall sword will descend and explode violently, dealing physical damage to nearby opponents. This damage scales on a number of energy stacks the Lightfall sword has accumulated. If Eula leaves the field, the Lightfall sword will explode immediately. So that's something you want to note as well. This is going to allow you to control it a little bit better if you really want to. But the biggest thing you want to know here is these scalings are great. Lightfall sword base damage, skill damage, really great, really great. But then once you start considering the stacks that you can build up with this elemental burst and the description we were talking about, you can build up to 30 stacks, and each stack does 128% damage. So you can really, really ramp this up into some insane numbers, and that's why we're able to hit things like 100k physical damage crits. It's just insane. Now, do keep in mind this does have a long cooldown and a high energy cost, I think rightfully so, due to the fact that you're just going to be dealing massive amounts of physical damage, but it really isn't that hard to trigger, as you saw, as long as you keep dealing damage. Now, the biggest downside to Eula here is obviously she seems like a very selfish character, so you are going to need to pair her with characters that have a lot of their abilities off the field. Somebody like Fischl or Albedo are going to be amazing for her, but we'll just have to go ahead and see how that all pans out. Going on to her next passive talent here, we have if 2 stacks of Grimheart are consumed upon unleashing the holding mode of Eyesight Vortex, a Shattered Lightfall sword will be created that will explode immediately, dealing 50% of the base physical damage dealt by Lightfall sword created by Glacial Illumination. It's pretty nice because it is just some free extra damage. You get an extra amount of physical damage on top of the cryo damage you're going to be dealing from consuming those stacks and holding your sword there. You might have noticed that in the gameplay earlier, been wondering where exactly that came from, because, you know, the stacks were consumed, we did the cryo damage, and then you saw some physical damage. You might have wondered where that came from. This is where that came from. This passive, just some free extra physical damage, and it's nothing to scoff at either. And then we've got something like Wellspring of Warlust. When Glacial Illumination is cast, the cooldown of Eyesight Vortex is reset, and Eula gains 1 stack of Grimheart. This is very cool because it's going to allow her gameplay loop to essentially feed itself. So you're going to get your E going, you're going to be generating energy with your E, you're going to get your 2 stacks, you're going to hold, you're going to deal a bunch of damage with your hold E skill, and then you're going to be able to cast Q to just reset on the long cooldown version of your E skill and gain another stack of Grimheart, which is just going to facilitate you popping off and building up those stacks on your elemental burst, which is very important to know. And then finally, we have our last passive talent here is when Eula crafts character talent materials, she has a 10% chance to receive double the product. Nothing too bad, just pretty darn good stuff. Yeah, you really can't complain, right? Now, talking about Consolations, I will say Eula's Consolations are insane. Her C1 and C2 alone are very, very good, but we're not going to talk about them too much because most of us aren't going to be getting Consolations of a 5-star here, as that is a ton of primos, and it's really worth it. Even though these are really strong, I think she's good enough on her own, and you're not really going to need to go for them. But of course, I did go over each of these here, so if you want to read them, go ahead and feel free. Now, in terms of artifact sets, I think we could have all guessed that the Pale Flame set was going to be basically her best in slot. It gives you some physical damage, it increases your attack, and increases your physical damage more, you know, if you get the stacks activated, which is very easy to do with her. This is basically just a set that is tailor-made for Eula, and you really can't go wrong by doing this 4-piece set. but some of you might be wondering what other artifact sets you can use, and we'll go over that in just a moment. All right, one disclaimer I wanted to give you guys is that the Song of Broken Pines is here and during the trial run, of course, and this weapon is just really good, really high base attack. The physical damage is nice, but it's nothing too crazy, but then the passive here is really good, increasing your attack, your normal attack speed, and attack additionally. It's all just a very good sword, and it is tailor-made for Eula. So some of the gameplay might be a little bit exaggerated in the trial run. I want you guys to keep that in mind if you are thinking about summoning for Eula. Alright, we're back in the real world here, so I can go ahead and show you guys some artifacts that might be the most beneficial for Eula. Now, of course, things like the Bloodstained Chivalry set are going to be good options for giving her that 25% physical damage. Now, you can do 2-piece of the Bloodstain and 2-piece of the Pale Flame. That's definitely an option. It's going to be a free 50% damage, physical damage increase, which is really nice. And if you just can't get a really good 4-piece Pale Flame, then I would recommend going for a 2 Bloodstain, 2 Pale Flame, as that might be a little bit easier to grab for yourself personally, and it's not going to be that bad of an option. Other than that, there aren't really other sets that I can really recommend for Eula that are going to even really come close to something like the Pale Flame. Of course, something like Gladiator isn't going to be a bad option, and maybe doing a 2-piece of the Pale Flame and 2-piece of the Icebreaker's Resolve or Blizzard Strayer here isn't going to be a bad option, but really you just can't beat out that Pale Flame. Eula is a very selfish character, and that set is just going to work for her really well. Now, of course, if you wanted to run some kind of wacky Noblesse build on her, you could, but I really don't think that's the route to go. I gotta say, it's likely just going to be Pale Flame, or maybe 2-piece Bloodstain, 2-piece Pale Flame, and maybe just like 2-piece Pale Flame or 2-piece Bloodstained with something like Noblesse if you're really struggling for artifacts, or something like Gladiators. Those are probably just going to be your best options overall, but realistically, Pale Flame is the way to go. Of course, for Eula, she doesn't have any special scaling, so things like an attack percent sands are going to be some of your best options. And then, of course, something like a physical damage cup is going to be really good. Now, you might be wondering if you want to go for a cryo cup or a physical damage cup. I've got to tell you, I think the physical damage cup is just going to far exceed the cryo damage cup. I think it's just going to be a lot better to go ahead and go for physical, but cryo isn't the worst option if you just don't have a physical cup for some reason. You could do cryo until you get a good physical cup. And then, of course, something like crit rate or crit damage is going to be the best helmet for her. As I said, she doesn't have any special scalings there, so just getting that good crit rate and crit damage ratio is going to be the most important. And then, as we mentioned, since Eula doesn't really have any special scalings, of course you're going to be wanting to shoot for things like crit rate and crit damage on her artifacts. Energy recharge is going to help you out a ton, considering she has a high cost energy recharge. And then elemental mastery is not going to really help you nearly as much on Eula, because she is not going to be big on reaction damage since she's going to be focusing so much on physical. You're not going to want to worry too much about elemental mastery. Instead, you're going to want to be looking for things like flat attack or attack percent. But those crit rate, crit damage, and energy recharge are going to be your first and foremost important substats you're going to want to be looking for. As for weapons for Eula, if you're not getting the 5-star or you don't have any of the 5-star weapons, some of your best options are probably going to be things like the Black Cliff Slasher or something like the Serpent Spine. I think the Serpent Spine more so being a pretty good option, allowing her to just deal more damage overall. It's not going to discriminate between her physical or cryo damage. I think it's going to be a really solid option, but something like the Snow Tomb Star Silver is actually going to be a fantastic 4-star option for her, because it does give her that physical damage bonus that has a pretty solid base attack, and then on top of that you're going to be getting the added benefit of you're often going to be getting the added benefit at least of the icicle dealing extra damage, because they'll be affected by cryo, because she's going to be applying a little bit of cryo while she's on the field there. And if you don't have any of those options, then the Prototype Archaic is always a good old reliable, and the Sacrificial Greatsword wouldn't be the worst thing, considering her energy recharge is pretty bad. But I think something like the Snow Tomb Star Silver or the Serpent Spine are going to be your best options for her. And if you are really hurting for Claymores and you just don't have any 4-stars, you could do something like the Skyrider Greatsword. it's certainly not a bad option because it does increase your normal and charge attack damage. It gives a physical damage bonus scaling, and just overall isn't really the worst thing, but it is a 3-star, so its base attack is abysmal compared to something like the 4 stars, and that's definitely going to fall off in the end game, but it could be a substitute for you until you get a better sword. Overall, I think that's it for Eula herself, but I do want to talk about some potential pairings that would be really good. Do keep in mind we are getting a buff to some of the transformative reactions in 1.6, i.e. things like Shatter, the Superconduct, and Electrocharge are going to be much better in the next update, or, you know, coming soon, and that's something you want to consider for building Eula, as that's going to be the move in the future, I'm sure. So somebody like Xingqiu is actually going to be a really good pairing for her. You know, a character that is on her banner, by the way. It's going to allow you to freeze characters and shatter them, dealing some physical damage, and that damage is going to be amplified in the future. But as I said already, somebody like Fischl is going to be one of the best options for her. Fischl barely needs to be on the field to deal tons of damage, and she deals electro damage at that, which is going to allow you to get that Superconduct going, which is going to allow you to deal extra physical damage, and we all know Eula loves physical damage. But somebody like Beidou is also a good option, and is also on that same banner, as Beidou has a really powerful burst. The only problem with Beidou being the fact that her energy cost is 80, similar to Eula, and can be pretty hard to get. And I also mentioned somebody as like Albedo being a really good option, since he barely needs to be on the field to deal all of his damage as well, but he doesn't really synergize with Eula in any particular way. And then if you are struggling to apply some of your cryo, somebody like Ganyu or Rosaria, or even Diona as a shield slash cryo applier, are going to help you out a bit if you just find yourself not being able to proc Superconduct as reliably as you'd like to. Those are going to be some good options for you as well. I couldn't really recommend any of the Pyro characters because of the fact that she's just not really looking for melt damage, although you could do something like that. I just don't think it's optimal. Of course, Jinyan is on her banner, and Jinyan is not a bad option for her, especially at her final hidden passive talent here. Allowing you to deal an additional 15% physical damage is pretty nice, but I really don't think it's the best option. I have a feeling it'll just get in the way of some of your reactions, and you might just be better off shooting for something else. Well, that's going to be it for the video. I just wanted to give some of my thoughts on Eula. I think she's a really strong character. I really like her, and I will be using the wishes that I get on this banner. And if I get her, I get her, then, and, you know, if I don't, I don't. I'm really not too worried about it, because I am looking forward to some of the future characters that have been leaked. And if they are coming, then I'm going to be extremely excited for them. And that's what I'm kind of saving up my primos for, and why I'm not really spending too much on the banner. But I do want to give you guys my brief thoughts on the banner overall. It's not a bad banner. All of these characters are really solid, and all of these characters, especially the 4 stars, do really well with their constellations. Xingqiu especially having nutty constellations. Jinyan, I feel, isn't even really usable until you have her C2. So getting her C2 is huge and very helpful for her. And then Beidou's constellations are all just pluses. Her C4 being my favorite. They're all really rock solid. So wishing on the banner by itself really isn't that bad of an option. A lot of people were dumping on this banner, and I don't know why. It's a pretty solid banner, and all of the characters are pretty good. They may not synergize in the best way, but they certainly aren't like a bad pairing for each other. Anyway, as I said, it's going to be it for the video, and I hope you guys enjoyed and stuck around to the end. We are almost at 1K, and when 1K hits, the Discord will be dropping. I'm actually working on it right now as we speak, and that's going to be happening very, very soon, so stay tuned to the channel, subscribe for more, and I will catch you guys in the next video. My name is Blossoms. Peace.